Welcome back after the break. You're watching Indus News and I'm Fiza Jamal bringing you our main stories in detail. Pakistan has summoned the Indian High Commissioner to lodge a protest on New Delhi's move to revoke occupied Kashmir special status through a presidential decree. Foreign Secretary Sohail Mahmood said Pakistan unequivocally rejects the illegal actions taken by Indian government. Meanwhile, India's upper house, Rajya Sabha, has passed a bill to bifurcate occupied Kashmir into two union territories. This report has the details.
Tensions escalated last week after India sent an extra 100,000 troops to occupied Kashmir. It is already the world's most militarized zone, with 700,000 Indian troops occupying the disputed Himalayan territory. New Delhi has also amassed weapons and bolstered its troops along the line of control, but it did not say why until Monday morning. Home Minister Amit Shah told India's parliament that a presidential decree has been issued that scraps Kashmir's special status as a disputed territory. He also moved a parliamentary resolution to revoke Article 370 of the Constitution, which defines Kashmir's special status.
Using the powers vested under the third section of Article 370, following the recommendation of the Parliament, President announces that starting from the day the President of India will sign on the declaration and the day when it will be published in the Government's Gazette, all the sections of Article 370 will cease to hold good, except for the Section 1 of the article.
Under the bill, occupied Kashmir will be turned into territories governed by New Delhi. Occupied Jammu and Kashmir will have a local assembly, but Ladakh will not. The presidential decree will be in effect for 2 months, giving the Bharatiya Janata Party government time to craft a two-thirds majority in parliament. The opposition Bahujan Samaj Party has already announced its backing along with Biju Janata Dal Party. Such small parties may hold the balance, whether by backing the government or abstaining from voting. But political leaders in Indian-occupied Kashmir have warned that the constitutional amendment would trigger widespread unrest. Former Chief Minister Mehbooba Mufti said the move marks the darkest day in India's democratic history. National Conference Vice President Umar Abdullah called the amendment unconstitutional and illegal and vowed to challenge it.
Following up to that, Indian forces have placed leading politicians in occupied Kashmir under house arrest and cut off the region's telecom services. Ex-Chief Ministers Mehbooba Mufti and Umar Abdullah are among those detained. The intern leaders promised to resist any change to the disputed territory status. Speculation about India's intentions have been rife since it sent an extra 100,000 troops to the valley last week. United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres has called on Pakistan and India to show restraint. The Organization of Islamic Cooperation has also urged the international community to take notice of Kashmir's situation. A curfew has been imposed across occupied Kashmir after Indian forces killed 12 unarmed youths over the weekend. More from this unrest, India's opposition parties and Interior Minister Amit Shah have sparred in Parliament over the proposal to scrap special status of occupied Kashmir. This report has more.
The opposition leader in India's parliament, Ghulam Nabi Azad, called the government's move murder of democracy and constitution. He said the ruling Bharatiya Janata Party has no sense of history and geography and has destroyed Jammu and Kashmir for more votes. Azad said the government has decapitated India.
The BJP, Indian ruling Bharatiya Janata Party, has murdered the constitution and democracy today.
Mir Mohammad Fayaz, a lawmaker from PDP, the ruling BJP's former ally in occupied Jammu and Kashmir, tore a copy of the Indian constitution while opposing the bill. He was taken out of parliament in a dishevelled state. Fayaz then went on to sloganeer outside the parliament along with the only other PDP lawmaker, Nazir Ahmed Lawe.
They have made the constitution precarious. They have removed both Article 370 and 35A, which are registered in the constitution. They have finished the constitution and are blaming us.
The ruling BJP moved a bill in the upper house for making Jammu and Kashmir and Ladakh union territories and a resolution scrapping Article 370.
And a group of foreign diplomats has visited the line of control to view the impact site of India's cluster bombing. India used banned ammunition across LOC, resulting in civilian casualties. More in this report.
Use of illegal ammunition by Indian forces has attracted widespread condemnation from the world over. The foreign attaché said there is irrefutable evidence regarding the use of deadly bombs against civilian population. They said Pakistan should take the matter to international fora.
We saw some munitions and some holes, that's why, and we hope that Pakistani authorities can make a decision in this case and the right decision.
The local population has also briefed the visiting diplomats about the situation in the area. The residents asked the international community to take notice of India's brutalities.
I want to tell that use of cluster bombs is a violation of Geneva Convention and we strongly condemn it. We demanded international institutions to take notice of the situation.
The International Convention on Cluster Munitions prohibits the use, transfer and stockpiling of cluster bombs.
Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan says the Indian attempt to change the status of occupied Kashmir is against United Nations resolutions. Prime Minister Khan briefed Malaysia's Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad and Turkey's President Tayyip Erdogan about the Indian action. He said the measure will undermine regional peace, and expressing concern over the developments, Erdogan said Turkey supports Pakistan's stance on the issue. Malaysian Prime Minister Mohamad said he is closely monitoring the situation in occupied Kashmir. Meanwhile, Amnesty International criticized New Delhi's actions, saying the move will increase human rights violations in the occupied region. Azad Kashmir Prime Minister Raja Farooq Haider has condemned the Indian move to scrap occupied Kashmir special status under Article 370 of its constitution. More in this report.
Addressing the media, the Prime Minister said India has lost Kashmir completely today. He said the Modi government can start a genocide in occupied Kashmir after this bill. Haider also said Kashmiris in occupied valley will become second-grade citizens like Palestinians in Israel.
India is itself confused over the structure being devised for occupied Kashmir. Pakistan is united over its stance on Kashmir. We do not recognize any such constitution, as occupied Kashmir is not even a part of India. By scrapping the special status, India has actually disregarded its earlier position over occupied Kashmir.
AJK Prime Minister Raja Farooq Haider said he and his ministers will visit different countries after Eid to spread the message of Kashmir.
And protests have been held across Pakistan against India's move to strip occupied Jammu and Kashmir of special status. A large number of people participated in the rallies to show solidarity with the people of occupied Kashmir. Protesters said New Delhi's move is aimed to change the demographics of the occupied region. They also said India wants to turn Muslim-majority Indian occupied Kashmir into a Hindu-majority region. Moving on, 43 people have reportedly been killed after an airstrike hit a wedding ceremony in southwestern Libya. Dozens more were injured in the airstrike, which local media reports blamed on Khalifa Haftar's eastern forces. The attack comes a day after Tripoli's UN-recognized government said it shot down a drone operated by opposition forces. UN envoy Ghassan Salam earlier proposed a nationwide ceasefire for the Muslim festival of Eid al-Adha, starting from August the 11th. The envoy also called for the resumption of negotiations between the warring sides. 19 people have been killed after a car blew up outside Egypt's National Cancer Hospital in Cairo. The health ministry says 30 others were injured after the blast ripped through the front of the building. The Interior Ministry says a car being driven against traffic on Cairo's riverfront exploded after colliding with 3 other vehicles. The Prosecutor General has ordered an immediate investigation into the cause of the blast. This comes during a revival of Egypt's tourist industry after years of stagnation caused by political turmoil and violence. Syrian government says it is resuming military operations in the northeastern region after rebels bombed a Russian airbase. War monitors say government forces launched first airstrikes in Idlib since the truce was announced 4 days earlier. Syria accused Turkey of not abiding by its commitments under the ceasefire agreement. Earlier, Turkey said it will carry out an operation east of the Euphrates River in northern Syria. Iran's Foreign Minister Javad Zarif says his country will leave the 2015 nuclear deal if necessary. Addressing a news conference in Tehran, he said the United States has closed the door to diplomacy over the nuclear deal. This report has the details.
Tensions between the US and Iran rose last year after Washington pulled out of the nuclear deal and slapped sanctions on Tehran. Iranian Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif called the US sanctions economic terrorism. He asked European countries to accelerate their efforts to shield Iran's economy from the sanctions.
Today, economic terrorism is a reality. Economic terrorism means that you target ordinary citizens hoping that they would implement your policies. The US government has officially declared that if Iranian people would like to eat, they have to change their policies.
Zarif said the US is unable to form a Gulf maritime coalition and is standing alone in the world.
We were negotiating.
This shows that unilateralism discourse is isolated. Now that US, who follows the unilateralism discourse, wants to make a coalition, and one after another of the countries tell them they will not participate in the unilateral coalition.
Should not expect.
Zarif said Tehran will not turn a blind eye to maritime offences in the Gulf.
German Foreign Minister Heiko Maas says his country will not join a US-led naval mission in the Strait of Hormuz. Speaking to reporters in Poland, Maas said Germany favors a European mission, but warned it's rather difficult to make progress on that. He also said it would take time to convince the European Union to carry out such a mission. Baghdad has denied a tanker seized by Iran for allegedly smuggling fuel in the Gulf is Iraqi. Iran claims the ship was detained while illegally carrying 700,000 liters of Iraqi diesel oil. Iraq's oil ministry says it doesn't export diesel. Iran's state media says the seized vessel has been moved to Bushehr and 7 crew members placed in detention. This follows Iran's detention of a British-owned tanker in the Strait of Hormuz last month in retaliation for the seizure of one of its ships off Gibraltar. Six ISIS militants have been killed in northern Iraq after a US-led coalition airstrike hit a village near the town of Mahmour. Iraq's Joint Operations Command says the military surrounded a group of ISIS militants outside a village. A military officer says the move is a part of the ongoing anti-ISIS operation by the Iraqi and United States coalition. Russia says United States had dealt a serious blow to the international security system by leaving the Intermediate Nuclear Forces Treaty. Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov says the collapse of the treaty will have far-reaching consequences. Ryabkov says Russia will take comprehensive steps to protect itself, but also says that Moscow won't deploy missiles in Europe and other regions unless similar United States weapons appear in a particular area. Responding to protests in Russia, Germany says a police crackdown on peaceful protesters violates international obligations and undermines the right to fair elections. Hundreds of people were detained at a rally against the disqualification of independent candidates from next month's local elections in Moscow. The German government says the arrests are out of proportion to the peaceful nature of the demonstrations. Berlin slammed what it called repeated interference by the government in the guaranteed right to peaceful assembly and freedom of expression. The Russian local election is seen as a dry run for a national parliamentary election in 2021. Authorities say opposition candidates have failed to collect enough genuine signatures to register for the vote. Candidates deny the claim and insist on taking part in the polls. United Nations and Yemen's Houthi rebels have agreed to resume delivery of food aid. The assistance was suspended for 6 weeks in rebel-controlled areas. The World Food Programme says the accord ensures the accountability of humanitarian operations in Yemen. The Houthis say the agreement will guarantee effective distribution of food to those in need. United Nations suspended food aid deliveries to rebel-held areas in June following accusations of misuse of aid meant for civilians. According to United Nations, the suspension affected over 800,000 people. United States President Donald Trump has called for death penalty for those committing hate crimes and mass murder. He also urged lawmakers to pass legislation requiring strong background checks for firearm purchases. Referring to 2 U.S. shootings last week that killed 29 people, the U.S. president said mental illness and hatred pulled the trigger, not the gun. He also said gruesome video games contribute to violence in the society. He continued saying that United States nation must condemn racism, bigotry, and white supremacy.
The shooter in El Paso posted a manifesto online consumed by racist hate. In one voice, our nation must condemn racism, bigotry, and white supremacy. These sinister ideologies must be defeated. Hate has no place in America.
United Nations investigators have urged world leaders to impose sanctions on companies linked to Myanmar's military. A report says the Myanmar military has generated a fortune that helped fund atrocities against the Rohingya minority. UN investigators say foreign firms doing business with the military could be complicit in international crimes. United Nations report has identified 15 foreign firms having joint ventures with the military, while 44 others have some form of commercial ties. The investigators have also named 14 companies involved in arms sales to Myanmar and called for a ban on them. Meanwhile, over 200 flights have been cancelled today in Hong Kong, paralyzing the semi-autonomous territory. Protesters in the city have launched a citywide strike, crippling parts of the metropolis. Thousands of protesters have gathered in Hong Kong for the 9th straight week amid rising tensions with the government. The local media says 8 railway lines have been shut down by protesters blocking the entrance to commuter trains. Addressing a press conference, Chief Executive Carrie Lam warned protesters of the dangerous path their demonstrations seem to be taking. She said the government will maintain law and order in Hong Kong and restore public confidence.
The great majority of Hong Kong people are now in a state of great anxiety. Some of them do not know whether they could still take some forms of public transport, while others are right now being blocked on the way to work.
Protests in Hong Kong for the past 2 months have grown increasingly violent as police and protesters have clashed repeatedly. Now on to Cambodia. The Khmer Rouge's chief ideologist and brother number 2, Nguyen Chia, has died at the age of 93. The reign of terror led by brother number 1 Pol Pot has left 2 million Cambodians dead. Most of the regime's victims died due to starvation and mass executions carried out between 1975 and 79. A UN-backed court found Chia guilty of war crimes and sentenced him to life in prison last year. He was sentenced almost 4 decades after the Maoist regime was overthrown. Chia and other senior members of the ultra-Maoist group were put on trial in Cambodia courts. Currently, former President Khieu Samphan and leader Khaing Gyuk Ev are serving life sentences after being convicted of genocide. A cartoonist in Syria thinks she has found an easy way to tell the ordeal of the war-torn region. Amani Al-Ali takes her pen to the screen to sketch life in the embattled region of Idlib. More in this report.
Idlib is a jihadist-run region of 3 million people in war-torn Syria. It has come under increasing bombardment by the regime since late April despite a months-old truce. And Amani Al-Ali puts the ordeal of Syrians into cartoons while engaging in political satire.
I drew this painting after being touched by an image taken by a Syrian photographer of a displaced woman who lost her mind after losing her home. I chose to draw it with a blue pen, knowing that it is very hard and time-consuming to use it.
Through her art, Amani condemns international apathy towards civilian deaths. The cartoonist also dissents against the anti-regime bastion, which says is no different than regime. In one of her art pieces, a warplane drops candy wrappers containing TNT instead of sweets. The sketches are etched out in black and white with splashes of red.
I draw cartoon and comic drawings. In cartoon, I always focus on the Syrian situation. And when I switch to comics, I focus on the social situation and the issues of women in the liberated and the Syrian-controlled regions.
According to the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights, the spike in violence over the past 3 months has killed more than 790 civilians. Amani Al-Ali says through her art, she wants to show the world Syrians are not voiceless.
Rising global temperatures are affecting mussel farmers in Albania. They say their harvests are shrinking each year. Albanian authorities are trying to tackle the problem but are hindered by a lack of resources. More in this report.
Albania's mussel farmers could produce 6,000 tons of shellfish a year in the 1990s. That number has now shrunk to just 2,000. Farmers and climate scientists say rising global temperatures are to blame.
The mussel is the big loser of temperature increases because it cannot move to find another cooler place.
Microorganisms are thriving in Albania's waters because of climate change. They leave little oxygen for mussels. Consequently, they suffocate to death. Half of the young mussel farmers immersed in the water at the start of the summer this year have died.
Temperatures have reached nearly 30 degrees Celsius at the surface and even up to 1.5 meters deep, which is fatal for mussels.
A single prolonged heat wave can devastate harvests. Authorities are trying to control the problem by pumping cold water into mussel farms from nearby rivers. But this is expensive and resources are limited. As such, there is little that mussel farmers can do other than anxiously check weather forecasts.
Egypt has revealed the initial restoration stages of the gold-plated coffin of Tutankhamun's tomb, which was discovered in 1922. The restoration is expected to take around 8 months. Details in this report.
The restoration process began after the coffin was transferred to the new Grand Egyptian Museum in Cairo from the Valley of the Kings in Luxor. The boy king's golden coffin will be displayed along with related artifacts at the new museum by the end of 2019.
The reason why you are here is to show you a unique historical artifact, not just for Egypt, but for the entire world. This piece was found during the discovery of the tomb in November 1922.
The gilded wooden coffin stands at 2.23 feet tall and is decorated with a depiction of Tutankhamun holding pharaonic symbols. Egyptian Antiques Minister Khalid Al-Anani says the move will boost tourism in the country.
Imagine how it is going to be during the inauguration day, when we will put on display more than 5,000 pieces of Tutankhamun for the first time, as the biggest number that we previously displayed was 2,000 pieces. In God's will, this will be an addition to the Egyptian tourism.
The announcement comes after the controversial sale of a 3,000-year-old Tutankhamun artifact in London for $6 million.
American gardens are known for their neat landscaping. Now some people are opting for a more natural look. The new style also provides nesting space and nourishment to local wildlife. This report has the details.
Tidy grass lawns and white picket fences have long waited with the American dream. Now a growing rewilding movement is trying to reclaim these spaces for nature.
We really wanted to try to figure out how to make a garden that was in a sense easy to take care of, but also things that native plants, things that bloom in this area.
Rewilders also shun the use of pesticides, trying to work with local insect species rather than against them.
We had read about it. We also knew that putting chemicals on grass to try to keep it green seemed to be a futile process that wasn't good for kids playing on it or the environment or anything else.
Experts say the new trend can significantly slow down the loss of biodiversity.
More biodiversity of plants, we know it contributes to more biodiversity of insects, which can lead to more biodiversity of larger animals. Birds probably be the most interesting. The other part of that is that often looks messy.
Environmental scientist Chris Swan says rewilding can be the most transformative in inner cities. He went on to say that such efforts should be directed to all empty real estate in the US, which has increased over the years. 15% of the land in American cities is deemed vacant, an area roughly the size of Switzerland.
In business news, South Koreans have begun a widespread boycott of Japanese products amid a trade row. This comes after Tokyo imposed tighter controls on its exports to Seoul of material keys to the South Korean tech industry. More in this report.
South Korean supermarkets and customers have expressed firm opposition to Japanese products. In Seoul supermarkets, the products have been removed from shelves and replaced with placards encouraging the boycott.
According to current statistics, more than 150,000 supermarkets have removed Japanese products out of their shelves.
Despite economic losses, many supermarkets hope that the South Korean government will also support the boycott. A Gallup poll showed 80% of South Koreans do not want to buy Japanese products.
I will not interfere with whether supermarkets sell Japanese products or not. I just won't buy.
Although a large number of South Koreans are taking part in the campaign, there are still voices supporting a reasonable solution to the current dilemma.
And in sports news, Australia beat England by 251 runs to win the first test of the Ashes series at Edgbaston. The win has put Australia ahead in the series in United Kingdom for the first time in 14 years. Steve Smith was declared man of the match for scoring centuries in both innings for Australia. Nathan Lyons sent 6 batsmen back to pavilion in the second innings of England. This was the first test loss for England at Edgbaston in the last 11 years. Napoli beat Marseille 1-0 in a pre-season away friendly. Dries Mertens scored the winner for Napoli. Elif Elmas was given his first start in midfield as Piotr Zielinski pulled out because of flu. Lorenzo Insigne wasted a golden opportunity 10 minutes into the match when he fired straight at the goalkeeper. Napoli took the lead just before halftime with a well-worked move converted by Mertens. Napoli fans were not allowed to buy tickets for the match due to safety fears. As we bear the heat in Lahore over here, let's see what the weather is looking like today around the globe. Well, this is it from me this hour with our main stories. Stay tuned for further updates to Indus News.